Okay, these notes are over the Northwest Ordinance. By the end of the lecture, you should be able to identify basic information about the Northwest Ordinance, including the key vocabulary terms. So how did we get from the Declaration of Independence to the Northwest Ordinance? So we declare independence from Britain in 1776, we fight a war against them, and we win. So we have to now establish a government that works for the newly created states. So the Second Continental Congress is given the job of creating a new government, and they construct the Articles of Confederation. Overall, the Articles of Confederation are very weak, but there were some successes, which we will touch on later. The Articles of Confederation was drafted as the first national government, and under the Articles of Confederation, they created the Confederation Congress, which was the governing body, which was the legislative branch under the Articles. So it was really the only effective branch of government under the Articles, because most of the power was given to the states. The national government really had no power at all. The Confederation Congress then wrote the Northwest Ordinance, which was created to establish rules in the new territory, the Northwest Territory. This territory is territory that we acquired from the peace treaty with Britain when we won the Revolutionary War. So now we have this new territory, which comprises of the states Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and we have to figure out what we want to do with it. It doesn't really have a government because they're not states yet. So they don't apply, the rules of the land do not apply to these newly established territories. So we create an ordinance, which is an unofficial law. So if you think of like a noise ordinance or a curfew, those are ordinances to a city. They're rules that you have to follow within a given area. So the Northwest Ordinance was a set of laws that governed this new Northwest Territory. And under the Northwest Ordinance, it divided the territories up into smaller territories and was very complex, really, in forming townships and whatnot. And it also created steps for those territories to become states. So there were 3 steps to become states in the Northwest Territory, 3 stages that every territory went through. At stage 1, they picked their state leaders, and they chose laws from existing state laws. So they would look at Massachusetts state government and Georgia state government, South Carolina, New York. They would pick and choose laws that they liked and encompass them into the territorial laws for the given territory. In stage 2, when there were 5,000 free men, the landowners could vote in that territory and then choose representatives to represent their decisions within that territory and vote to make laws. At stage 3, when there were 60,000 inhabitants in the state or in the territory, they could apply for statehood. They had to write a state constitution and submit it to the Confederation Congress and then get it approved. And if it was approved, they became a state. So really, the Northwest Ordinance was important for several reasons. It set a precedent or an example for the future government of the United States. So we know that we replaced the Articles of Confederation with the Constitution, but a lot of the decisions and the laws that were put in place under the Northwest Ordinance were worked out really well, and so we adopted them into the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. You can see that there's a lot of, when we start looking at the document, there's a lot of examples that were set in this document that we encompassed into our Bill of Rights, like freedom of religion and fair trials. It addressed the issue of slavery. It set the standard for public education by setting territory aside for public education. And the funding of public education before you had to pay to go to school. They kind of established free and public education. It allowed for the process of admitting new states. So from this point forward, after the Northwest Ordinance was drafted, any state or territory that wanted to apply for statehood went through the same process that was established in this ordinance. So many of the provisions that we see, or the tools, terms that we see in the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights came from or derived from the Northwest Ordinance. So you can see some of the democratic ideals that were in the Northwest Ordinance. So if you remember, democracy is for the people, by the people. So these ideas are kind of the center of our government, and they derived from the Northwest Ordinance. So equality of states, saying that everybody entered on equal footing, meaning that if once you became a state, you were not treated any differently than the original states. Everybody was treated the same. The rules applied the same, whether you were an old state or a new state. It abolished slavery in the Northwest Territory, even though they did uphold the fugitive slave law. It did abolish slavery, so we did adopt this into the Constitution and Bill of Rights in the 13th Amendment. It established voting rights. Again, it addressed the issue of education. Many individual rights were granted, including freedom of religion, trial by jury, a reasonable bail. And it did address Indian affairs. In the Northwest Ordinance, it did say that the land would be not taken away from Indians without their permission, and that settlers were forbidden to hurt the natives. This one kind of got pushed to the wayside, unfortunately. But there were many, again, important precedents, examples set in this document that we still see today.